So digital humanities and using technology to enhance student learning in a classroom. And so this is interesting because using technology really helps to engage the students in the classroom. Once again, because I'm dealing with second semester seniors for the most part, engagement was a big issue. A lot of the students had already checked out, didn't really want to be there, and so using technology was kind of my way to get them back. I tried a bunch of different things in the classroom, and so we'll talk a little bit about how I used them and what happened with them. The first one was flip cameras. We did a role play activity where there was a reporter role, and so the idea here is each of these reporters had the camera and they were supposed to be kind of filming what was going on. Because there was a lot of conversations happening all at the same time, I couldn't be everywhere at once. I had the students record those with the idea that I would listen to them later to be able to understand, get a better grasp as to what was going on in the classroom, as well as I was going to use those as part of a future lecture. It was a really cool idea. But in the end, the students were engaged. They did want to be filmed, and so they tried to do what they could in order to be on the camera. But they were also horsing around with the cameras, and much of the stuff that they were shooting I wasn't able to use. And in some classes, absolutely none of the film was usable for the next project. Part of that can be attributed to the way I introduced it and my expectations of what I was looking for. Part of it was the students weren't able to handle using the cameras and the freedom that it provided in that situation. So would I use flip cameras in the classroom again? Yes, but probably in a much more structured format. And it would not be the first piece of technology that I introduced into the classroom as it was here. Smart boards. For using the framing routines and the concept mastery, each student had a copy of the worksheet, but I also would have a copy of it on the smart board, and it made it much easier for me to explain how things were going, and it was much easier for us to fill out as a group, as we literally wrote it out together. So the idea here was to avoid a lot of the confusion in filling these things out, along with letting the students review them. So the next day, I would put up a blank slide on the board, and I would invite the students up to come teach each other. What did we go over? For somebody who wasn't here yesterday, help them fill in the blanks. And that worked out really well. The students were able to follow along much better with the diagrams. The students would compete to write on the board, and a lot of students who aren't usually engaged, who don't usually participate, would want to come up and write on the board. If they didn't know the answer, they would turn around and ask somebody the answer so that they could go up and write on the board. And so while the goal here wasn't so that the students to show off, it was for the students to be engaged and to work together. Yes, I would use this technology again to the fullest extent possible, provided that a classroom has a smart board. It's a very valuable tool to be used this way, to kind of work together. In one class, I had a student that would kind of volunteer to be the teacher. He would be the same one that would volunteer almost any time, and he would go up and he would explain things, and he was able to explain things in a different way that may have made more sense to his peers than I would. In other classes, each different people would fill in every block, and it helped to keep everybody engaged as we were filling things in. The students were more likely to pay attention if it was their peer presenting the information than if it was coming from an adult. And so this provided a way for me to do that with structure and to be able to get the most out of it. YouTube. For a few different lessons, I added videos from YouTube, and the idea here was to engage the students and to present the information in a slightly different manner. These are clips from different videos that I had used. The one on the far right is going to be one I used for political parties. It was two kids hanging out. They created a rap talking about a lot of the information. It covers almost everything the students needed to know about political parties, but it's in a more entertaining manner than listening to a teacher talk about it or even going through and looking at different brochures. Here, with the three big pigs, it was a current event. It's a video, and it talks about what was going on with the leader of Tunisia, with the leader of Egypt, and the leader of Libya, and it's done as mirroring the game Angry Birds, which many of them were familiar with. And so that was very interesting. And then the other image, which didn't show up. There's an image right there. And what that was is when we were talking about the influence of media on elections, I was able to find on YouTube a video of the Kennedy-Nixon debates, and I had the students listen to it, and then I would put up the video so the students could watch it, so they can compare the effect that it would have listening to it over the radio versus watching it on TV. And so that was a very powerful thing for the students to witness and to be able to discuss and talk about. And so YouTube allowed me to do that in the classroom. While the students found some of the videos annoying, like the rap, they did pay attention. It was hard for them not to kind of get into it. It had a little bit of a beat. It would get stuck in your head. And even if you didn't want it to, that kind of happened anyways. It was a great way to depict current events, especially with the 3 Big Pigs video, and allowed for different experiences. Would I use this again? Most definitely. Provided I have the technology in the classroom to use it, videos are a good way to keep students engaged, break things up, are good for review, and a lot of times it involves showing people that are their age doing things around the content. And so it was very interesting for them to watch that way. Alright, so for the Action Research Project, I looked at my other class. So not the government class, my sociology class. Because it was an elective, many of the students chose never to participate. Even bribing with stickers and candy, which had worked in previous classes, just bounced off their foreheads. Students did not want to do anything, no matter how hard I tried. So, I tried Poll Everywhere. So, the students would often have their phones out in class. And even though this was against school rules, it still happened all the time. And so, this provided me a way to use that, something they were already doing in class, and applying it to the content and what we were doing. Poll Everywhere is actually really easy to use, and I used it to conduct a review. So the students had a very large test coming up the next day. Other review activities I had tried weren't working, and so I needed to provide something for them to get involved in, for them to do. The results. Everyone was engaged. Every student, if they had a phone that agreed with the Poll Everywhere technology, some of them did not. But every student answered the question in the review. Students that did not have the phone either borrowed somebody else's phone. Here, when you text your results, I'll borrow it and I'll text mine. Or they would vocally support their answers. Wait a second, why did you choose that? What's going on here? I thought it was this one. And so, some of the students that were not typically involved thought it would be really funny if they purposely put up their wrong answers. Because it displays the graph of results, they thought it would be really entertaining, because they are high schoolers. And other students would become upset by this. Why would you do that? Why are you messing up our results? And so it caused this discussion. Why is this the right answer? Why is that not the right answer? And there was more discussion in that class about those questions than there had been in any previous class. So there was the most discussion and on topic in that class. And then the students did perform well on the test next day. So I would say that it was an incredible success using this technology in the classroom. Again, it would provide, or there would be necessary to get approval from a principal using this in any other classroom, because you are talking about having cell phones out, and that is against the rules in many classrooms. And I wouldn't use it for an entire class period. Again, I would do a couple questions at a time. Either review questions at the beginning of class or at the end of class, but only a couple at a time. And that is my project.
With the Poll Everywhere, did you actually have data that compared the tests that they took for this one compared to the other types of tests they've taken to see a difference in results, or can you talk to that a little bit?
This is the only test that I had given.
Okay. What about when your cooperating teacher gave tests? Did she give tests to compare?
She had given a test. Her previous test had been open book, and so I don't know how to exactly compare things with that.
And how did you structure the questions? Do you have like screenshots or structures of what the questions looked like and things like that?
I can pull up my Poll Everywhere account and do that, but I don't have them as part of this. And what the questions came straight from the textbook testing database. My cooperating teacher encouraged me to pull all the test questions from there, and so that's where I pulled the review questions from. So they would be structured exactly the same, so students would be familiar with that.
How was the use of the smartboard any different from, say, having that as a transparency and kids writing on it? Or how do you see that being any different? Or what was it that you thought was good about the smartboard in that sense? Because it seemed very much just like writing on the board. Was there anything else that I was missing there?
I don't know. I feel like it was easier because it's a newer technology. The students were more excited about using it. Whereas when writing on an overhead transparency, a lot of kids either didn't like using it, their handwriting was messy, they get pen all over their hands. It was a lot easier than that. For the most part, the way I had used a smartboard was not much different than a transparency, other than that was the technology that was available to me, whereas an overhead projector wasn't in my classroom.
Did you see any different uses of teachers using the smartboard differently? You know, have you seen other examples in the school of different use of the smartboard, or is it generally used where kids come up and write on the board and projection and stuff? Just in general, out of interest.
In general, the only way I've seen the smartboard used is to write on it. Either teachers would open up a very large document so they could write and then keep scrolling down, and so they could scroll back. And that was an interesting way to use it. Instead of writing on transparencies where you're shifting between pages, it's all right there in order. But for the most part, it's just a matter of taking notes and writing on it.
And then my final question is, you talked about structure with regard to the use of the video, or the flips, and how it didn't really work. What would you have done differently then? What does that mean then? What, if you're using things like iFlips, what type of structures do you have to start putting in place ahead of time to make something like that useful, or to make it purposeful? And you can even go to the point of it, why were you doing that in the first place, and then how would you change it up?
The point of using the flips was talking about, I wanted the students, there to be reporters, to be talking about the influence of media, because we're talking about lobbying, and so the influence of reporters and media on that. But media in general was a topic I was going to be talking about the next week. And so I wanted to be able to use some interviews of the students interviewing one another as part of that media lecture. I did not make that very clear to the students, other than I was hoping to use the footage later. And so the students were probably confused about what I was looking for when it came to the media, when it came to what they actually flipped. The other thing is the students, this was very early in my student teaching experience, and so there wasn't a lot of mutual respect between me and the students and what I was trying to do. Again, probably much of that was my fault, but because there wasn't that community of respect there for me and for what I was trying to do and working with them, they weren't taking it very seriously, and they were just kind of messing around with them. Here, one girl did not want to be on the flip camera, and so there was a couple of reporters that made it their goal to get her on a camera, whereas that wasn't the idea of the lecture or of the lesson and what was going on. That's all they were focused on, because she really didn't want to be on a camera. And so that's kind of the ways that things didn't work out. In the future, I would have to be much more clear about my expectations, what I expect to go on here, what I'm looking for, the kind of behaviors that are unacceptable. I will take the camera away if I catch you doing these different things. As well as having a classroom where there is more respect, where the students know before I even have to say anything that that is not acceptable.
Yeah.
Yes, other questions?
Thank you. Cheers.